When we just started streaming, so
Where's my
everyone,
other
just so you
manager?
know, Matt Ray turned off the robot vacuum cleaner that was
No,
making
I
a
didn't turn
nice
it off.
little. Didn't turn it off. He
Closed the
closed the door. It was making a nice little hum, like a little, like you're on a plane, kind of little hum.
Oh,
It was
yeah.
nice.
I liked it.
Close the door, and it just perfect. It was like noise canceling.
Best thing I bought in a long time.
I mean, I know as our old friend Bridget used to say, sort of, what was her phrase? Something about like poor life choices. But I find the sound of an airplane very calming. It puts me right to sleep.
Are there people that don't? I thought that like emulates the womb. I thought that was
well.
Thing.
It's good, but the reason that I find it so calming is that I have spent so much time in an airplane.
True.
Like, and it's just like, of all places. Well, wow, I'm really doing some self-analysis here, but I feel very safe on an airplane. Like, in fact, so on an airplane, it's not going to go down despite what people think. It's probably more dangerous for me to get on my bike and like bike around my neighborhood than, someone's just got
I believe that would be exponentially more dangerous.
Right. Whereas an airplane,
the streets of Amsterdam.
Right. Super safe. Now, the other thing on an airplane, it's a complete guilt-free zone. If you don't actually get anything productive done on an airplane, not your fault.
Yeah.
Right. Like, so you literally are forced, if you so welcome it, and also have no children to watch. This is very key. Like, you have like, you're forced to relax. There's no excuse not to. So,
exactly.
No,
I look forward to my plane time.
Now, now on plane time, do you see the idea of being disconnected as a feature or a bug? Like, so I guess you can't use, you can't text people and get emails. I mean, again, there's various degrees. Like some plane, obviously there's Wi-Fi depending on which plane you're on and like where you're flying to. So what do you like? Do you prefer, let's call it like, no Wi-Fi somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean, really can't be reached for 2 to 3 hours at least, if not longer? Or do you prefer like a long continental flight where you can kind of be like, you're on Delta with the good Wi-Fi and you kind of just do whatever you want? Like which flight do you prefer better, Kote?
Now, I feel like this is the kind of question that a fantastic therapist would ask you. They're really trying to like needle down to like the true you, because I think the way I would answer that, and this has evolved over I was thinking about this recently. I started traveling seriously without a smile, for work in 2005. So that's 18 years, almost 20 years. And back then there was no Wi-Fi on planes. So it was a completely like guilt-free experience. But what I'd like to do now is, I think internet availability on planes, everyone assumes you have internet on planes, but someone who would penalize you for slacking off travels enough to know that it doesn't work that great, right? And you also have to pay for it. So I think what you can do is you can kind of elect to be responsible. So getting around to answering your questions, of course you're going to get internet. Your experience is better, right? You're going to get the internet. But what you have to do is you got to work on yourself to be like, but I'm going to pretend like I don't have internet with regards to responsible behavior and work.
I like it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so what I do is generally on the, let's say I'm on a, and Matt Ray will sympathize here. Let's say I'm on a 8 to 15-hour flight, right? Like, I feel like the top and the tail hour, you're responsible. You're like sending some emails. You might be talking in Slack. You're like, oh, I'm on a plane. Right. Sorry, I can't make your meeting. I'm traveling. This is one of my favorites for not doing something. And, so you've got to kind of like deploy this hour, right? But beyond that hour, you're just like, I don't know, I'm over fucking Siberia. Shit don't work, right?
Right.
And then so you can, and yet it still kind of does work more or less. So you can engage with your internet activities, whatever they may be. Now, however, being also, what's the phrase? Accurate about it. I have found that when you are over Siberia, the internet doesn't work. So there is kind of like a certain point where genuinely it doesn't work. Like, I don't know when that is, but there is a significant, especially crossing the Atlantic, it just doesn't function. And so that's when you catch up on Marvel movies.
Well, but I was gonna say though, like, I feel like at this point, like it's very airline specific. I have been told, and I don't know this firsthand, that Delta Internet, I think in the continental United States, is fantastic. Like it's like broadband. You can do whatever you want.
Absolutely.
Now I do know firsthand, Southwest and American totally hit or miss. If someone's like, "Hey, I was on Southwest," it's like basically that just means they could probably text you, but that was it. Like you're not gonna do anything. And then American, I think, is very spotty as well. So I think it's almost you have to like know what airline they're on, where they're flying to. And then of course, like now I think the excuse I come up with a lot of times is like, well, I don't have my big monitors. It's like, oh, I got I don't have like, my stuff. I don't have my
I don't have my 3 screens. And how
kind of
can I work?
sometimes there's like an expense report or like certain things. I'm just like, well, I can't do that on my laptop. I need my big screen because
it's like you have the receipt on one screen and
got to see all the cells and the PowerPoint. And I'm old, I can't see well, so I don't know. So that's another just fake excuse I come up with when I don't.
See, go ahead.
I mean, I'm the opposite of Cote. So I don't want internet. I mean, for the longest time, and this is still kind of true. There's not going to be internet on the flights across the Pacific, there hasn't been, or I was flying American or whatever, right? And so I looked at it as like, the next 15 hours is quality, offline time. And so I have the laptop, chock full of downloads and catch up on reading. And the downside, of course, is like, you go to build some code, and of course it has a dependency, and you got to hit Stack Overflow or something. The worst. But I embraced it. I was just like, next 15 hours, it's cone of silence. But now I wanted to stay in that lifestyle, and now you're telling me like, no, internet's actually good everywhere now, because I'm still in kind of like totally I don't even check. And I think
you have the ultimate get out of jail free. I mean, listen, you're flying a route where there's like nothing. There's like Tasmania. There's just not. There's literally. Still that Amazon satellite thing or Starlink. There's like you're not getting anything, man. There's literally nothing over there. So
okay, good. Thanks for making my excuses for me.
I know you got like at least 10 hours. I don't know exactly the flight path, but like it feels like you got a good 10, 12 hours of just like we are over nothing.
Absolutely nothing.
We're just one mishap away from an episode of Lost starting, right? That's where you're at.
That does cross my mind every single flight.
The principle I live by, I think, I forget if this was it must have been in 2006 or 7 or something. Like this is back when Twitter was a thing that people did. And I remember tweeting something about like, I'm not sure if I should. It was worded more cleverly than this, to my credit, but like, I'm on a plane for work. I don't know if I should be working or not working or zoning out. And I think it was one of the Illuminati people at the time, I forget which one, was just like, no, if you're an analyst and you're on a plane, you don't work. Like it's just that's your time to like zone out. And that really stuck with me. I don't know if it was Jonathan Eunice or John Collins or maybe it's some of the MWD people, but like it really like, it makes sense. And I think this is one of those things where like, if you travel a lot for work, as many of us do, you if you were a manager of those people or some sort of auditor, without a doubt, you would be like, yeah, just don't do anything. It's fine. Right. Like the plane is like this sacred time to just chill out. It's, you got to deal with it.
It's my sacred time.
Yeah. And it's part of your reward, so don't do stuff on the plane. It doesn't make sense unless you brought your big monitors, in which case go right ahead. Well, speaking of big monitors, there was a, I always enjoy Timothy Prickett Morgan. He's over at the IT Jungle. And, one of the things he does, which I would never be able to do it this way, but I think he is supreme at taking the Gartner and otherwise market estimates and just kind of going over them and adding some commentary. And so he looked at the most recent public cloud sort of like forecasts and estimates from Gartner, which was great. And, he looked over it. And as we said over the years, the thrilling part about covering the revenue and the TAMs of public cloud companies is nothing, because they are always big and growing. And so like, other than the numbers, I think one of the things in his kind of write-up that I thought was, there were a couple of things that I thought were very interesting, which, you know, you can rely on for TPM to give you, being a veteran reporter. He brought up 2 points that I thought were great. One is that it was a reminder that in the, correct me if I'm wrong, but would you say the early 2010s, maybe late 2000s, early 2010s, there was this notion that platform as a service was going to be a big deal, right? And that like SaaS was going to be a big deal, which I think panned out, obviously. But like Azure and Google both sort of went for platform as a service as like the thing. And their reasoning was that, why would you want infrastructure like that? You're just going to build up this thing on top of it, and infrastructure is just a bunch of hassle. So let's just like deploy this PaaS thing. So that was his first point. And I think the second thing that was interesting was, that kind of evoked in my mind, was remembering at the time, you know, I was doing some strategy for cloud for a company. And it reminded me that at the time, you know, let's say 2009 to 2013, like if you had gone to one of the traditional vendors, which is to say hardware vendors, and you had told them how much money it was going to cost you to get into cloud, they would have told you this was a stupid idea, right? Like, you're going to spend all this money. It's not going to be worth it. It's not going to pay off. It's a terrible investment for us. And yet here we are. And so, there's two things there. One is like that PaaS thing. That's interesting. Didn't really pan out that way.
Right.
But then two, I don't think it's an example of the innovator's dilemma or disruptive theory or something, but there's something interesting to be learned from, actually, even in 2010 and 2011 and 2012, if HP and Dell and IBM would have spent untold billions of dollars building out a public cloud, it might have been a good idea.
But right? Are you like forgetting about, you know, HP Cloud and, you know, and Rackspace? And
I don't know the numbers of everyone's spending, but my memory.
But my point is, like, you know, I think 2011, 2012, that was, you know, OpenStack. And
I agree. But I remember doing with Brandon and I's old friend Prabhakar, I remember doing some decks, some spreadsheets, and they were kind of like what you see from Charles Fitzgerald nowadays, where like Amazon was spending, I'm going to make up numbers to make a point. Sure. Amazon would be spending like $3 billion a year, like 10 billion cumulative. And then all these other vendors would be like, how about 50 million?
Right.
Yeah. And it was just sort of like, yeah, you got to turn the knob way up.
They're right? Like, check it out. We built a 747, and they're like, check it out. I've got a homemade airplane.
And so there's some sort of like, other than just being like, I don't know, you don't want to take risks or something, but there's some kind of like theory of thinking, just like innovator's dilemma, disruptive stuff, where you don't have the whatever to invest an insane amount of money.
The whatever, as Cote holds his hands suggestively in front of the screen.
I mean, I don't mean it that way. I'm just gesturing with my hands. In fact, I don't know what that is. Like, but it's clear in this case
you don't have the commitment, the confidence. You are trying to be wishy-washy about your commitment to what has to be a big spend.
I think it's that, and I would add on to it, like, you don't have any institutional knowledge. Like, you go back,
that too. It's a 1-2 punch.
Yeah, Amazon was very familiar with spending tons on, you know, capital costs because to run the
big bets.
Google, I think much the same, right? They were just used to spending tons of infrastructure. So I think that's the heart. And Microsoft, I think we can say this is a special case, but I think when you're in and maybe this is when you and Prabhakar are having the strategy discussions, I think it's just so easy for like a Dell, an IBM, HP to say, well, yeah, no, or Oracle, like we're in, we want to do it. And let's, yeah, you know what, we're going to be in, we'll do it for 100 million, and feeling like that's a really safe bet and a good, let's like proof of concept. But to your point, it's like at some point, if you don't have the table stakes, you just never, you never get there. And so I think that's probably in retrospect what we could say, that those companies made a very rational, smart decision at the time that in hindsight,
for sure,
was completely awful.
It's almost like the opposite of a future-looking sunk cost fallacy, where it's like, no, you got to sink it all, right? like don't like, well, don't envision that.
There's a difference there's a difference between making the right decision and the safe decision, right?
Yeah.
So that's what it is. They're looking at, well, if I do this, the stock market's going to be happy with whatever it is that we've decided. And meanwhile, Amazon's like, hey, stock market, we don't care. We're making 5-year bets. And the stock market looked at Amazon and like, okay, we'll let you do that. But if the traditional players did that, well, they get gobbled up by PE, right?
So I like that, because I think that's getting towards the issue of it. And let's put it this way, where we talk over the years every now and then about the permission that your let's call them shareholders give you to do things. And maybe that's part of it, is it really is like legitimately, we don't have permission to spend billions of dollars on this speculative thing. And we haven't really like built up the ability to do that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think, to put a couple numbers to it, though, I think, kind of looking at some of the actual overall spend here, the PaaS number for 2023 was 145 billion. And then the infrastructure as a service was 143 billion. And then the SaaS leading the way was 205 billion. So I think it is kind of interesting when you look at all three of those things. Like, one, they're all very distinct big markets. Maybe it's not a surprise SaaS leads the way, but this is sort of like, I think, a Cloudcast thing. They always say it's like, it's never one technology displaces the other. It's always and so maybe this is like a lesson we've learned in IT forever, is that no, people want every option. And so all of these markets are pretty thriving businesses and will probably continue to be thriving businesses for the foreseeable future. And the idea that PaaS probably does make the most sense. Probably that's why people jump to it. I guess Google and Azure, they said for sure this would be the solution. But no, in the end, people have real needs for infrastructure as a service. What were you going to say, Matt?
I feel like we're kind of possibly seeing this, safe decision versus right decision and some of the AI space, where Amazon doesn't have like, hey, we are firmly committed behind this one thing. Instead, they're playing the field. Yeah. And that feels like, that will get you whatever the field gets, and the field gets whatever's left over from 1 and 2. And so I think, when it comes to, AWS still is king of the cloud, but when it comes to the AI space, they're kind of considered third, and nobody looks at what their strategy is and says, that's the compelling strategy to, take the lead. They're just kind of like, well, that's playing the field.
Yeah. Well, maybe it's interesting to contrast like this, because this is the past with kind of the AI situation we're in now. It's like, who's all in? It seems like Microsoft was the first to just go all in on the investment with OpenAI, as well as the spend. And, now I guess, when we can kind of see it, I think we talked about it last week around who's buying the most GPUs. I think it was like Microsoft and actually Meta was the other one. So, it's an interesting question now, because there are a lot of companies that are announcing AI initiatives, but kind of to some, our earlier, discussion, it's like not many of them appear on that chart though, right? They sort of like, oh, we've got a model and here's something kind of interesting you can do, versus like, you look at that chart and like,
the thing about the chart that we're referred to is like, I want to see NVIDIA's number, right? Because they're the arms dealer who's also building themselves like, their own compound.
Yeah,
right?
their own cloud, in fact, right?
Yeah, they're like, oh, we gave those guys 150 million or 150,000 or whatever relatively small number it is. And they're like, oh, by the way, we kept 800,000 for ourselves.
Yeah, so I guess it's kind of interesting. Maybe it's just a question for us. Is like, I don't know. I kind of feel like everyone's building all these models, and at some point they'll just kind of be a commodity. There'll be so many that, but maybe that's the same thinking as someone's like, hey, everyone's building infrastructure as a service, and at some point, we all just have it, and it's like, actually, no, that didn't work out that way. Like you had to spend a lot, so maybe there's an argument to be made. It's like, no, like you got to go do the hard work and have all the GPUs to build whatever, all the next greatest models. And anyone that's not doing that isn't going to really be a player. But I think, looking at it right now, I don't know if I was in the boardroom and I saw two strategies, like mortgage everything, buy as many GPUs as you can versus like, what, let's just get the open source model and let's just tune it for our data set and see what happens.
Yeah. We'll grab all of them and
to your statement, Matt, it's the safe, that feels like the safe decision, right?
We'll buy some of those Chinese GPUs and we'll call it a day.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the right decision, but it feels real safe. Like you're like, what? Let's do that. I'm going to get my bonus and let's, move on to the next thing. I don't know. That's a good question.
Well, I think, and the following isn't like a universal like truth in this kind of stuff. It's just one of the many options you have in your toolkit. But it seems like there is a mode of building out your I don't know, your business and your strategy in the tech world where your first goal is to get, I'll keep being metaphoric, to get breathing room for a couple of years to innovate and do stuff. And how you establish that room is kind of a mystery. So for example, you have the breathing room to just, like we were talking about earlier, like dump a bunch of money into your public cloud stuff. And in this case, it's almost like with AI stuff, you have to have the breathing room or the time to just spend a bunch of money that makes no money. You got to like build out the hardware, build out your proprietary models. Even if you were to use an open source model, your issue is not use an open source model, but use all the other models. Like, I really don't know what I'm talking about here, but like when I was listening to, what's going on with like Amazon and all their AI stuff, like it seems kind of like, yeah, but you have very little that makes me need to use you. Like you just run the stuff for me, right? Like versus like the kind of lead that someone like a Microsoft and an OpenAI has is like, it's not describable, but like obviously they know what they're doing, so I would use them. And so they have almost like this permission to do weird and wacky stuff because they have this lead, this, to use your favorite thing, Brandon, they have the story part of like the share price. So they are allowed like fucking around versus like, if someone like Oracle or even worse like Cisco came in here with some AI thing, like their shareholders would just be like, no.
No, because we don't see it next quarter, or we don't see it in 2 quarters.
Right. And so there's something about like, and maybe this is like one of the not maybe, but obviously this is one of the magical things that like Microsoft figured out is like whatever it is I'm talking about, right? Where you get this like space to like innovate or do something. Yeah. And I don't really know how you achieve that. And
well, I do think to your point though, Microsoft, I think really kind of bought that from OpenAI and ChatGPT, because I think that's sort of the moment was like, well, OpenAI sort of gives the whole thing validation out of nowhere. They create a thing that has 100 million monthly active users, right? And it's just sort of like nobody saw it company. And Microsoft immediately makes the investment, gets the alignment. And I think that's sort of to your point, that's the story that like just as an investor, you're just like, well, I don't know. This group of people seems like they really have some good ideas. Let's give them more money. Yeah, let's just give them more. Even if we don't feel like they know what they're doing, we're like, let's just give them more money because their track record is very impressive here. Versus pick any of the other kind of older companies or just like anyone else. It's like everyone else is just saying everyone just says, well, we've been doing this too for all this time, and you should believe us. And it's like, well, we know that you haven't done anything like OpenAI. You didn't create something that has 100 million users and it's sort of redefining the category. Now, whether or not the category becomes something big, we probably don't know, but I think as an investor, you're like, well, I'm going to give my money to OpenAI and Microsoft and just see what happens, because they do have the best story at the moment.
Right. I mean, you want to bet on the companies that are willing to make bets, not the ones who are just playing along. Not those who are in the game, but those who are calling the shots and trying to actually make the change.
And you can also tell, like, the other thing, you can't help but notice is just like sort of an investor mindset is like how much on the back foot AWS and Google are, right? Like just this week, Google introduces Gemini, which by all accounts, is as good, if not better than ChatGPT. But the first thing we find out about it is that they like fake the demo, right? And it's like, it just kind of gives off this vibe of like, you don't seem like, for the company that's quote been doing it and invented it and sort of had all the AI researchers working there, you don't give off confidence that like you're really leading. If you even if the faking the demo is just sort of like not a big deal.
Maybe no. I mean, maybe that's the reason you have an AI ethics team. Is first rule of AI ethics team: don't fake the demo.
Well, that's the whole thing. It's just sort of immediately, it does immediately open yourself up. And then the same thing with AWS. It's just like, again, like we watched the entire keynote where I think I even said on this podcast, I said something like, they said safety like 8 million times. And so like literally the next day, a newsletter comes out saying, well, turns out there's some reports of it like leaking privacy information and hallucinating. And this is like the next day, right? And so, again, are these things really true? Like how big a deal are they in the long term? Maybe not, but it's sort of like, as if you're telling the story and the investor side of it, it's like, wow, it does look like your biggest competitors are really trying to rush to catch up, so much so that they're making mistakes and kind of, if you will, invalidating their own offerings.
Yeah, I think it is going to be like a mystery. Hopefully, someone solves. Where like, as you were saying, like Google had all of this stuff and still they felt the need to fake a demo. Like I went and used the Bard thing for my usual absurd Dungeons and Dragons stuff. And I feel like aside from the inability to upload files, it was better. Like it was really fast. It even had kind of like a nicer UI. It was more inventive. Like it seemed to work out pretty well. So I don't know why you'd have to like fake some demo. I actually didn't watch that, but it is it's quite.
But it's really like lack of confidence. You know what I mean? Like when you feel like you have the winning hand, right? And you feel like, you don't have to follow these things. You don't worry about it. You're like, put the demo up, just make it what it is, right? Just do the YouTube thing. But I think it's when you're feeling a lot of pressure to like respond and look good and like everything has to be perfect and you're not totally confident in what you have. I think that's why you start to make these mistakes, right? Or you create like, I mean, the classic one is like, we don't no one company I'm going to single out here, but like you kind of see it everywhere. It's sort of like, I'm not sure they have that much with AI, but they've clearly hired like a press and marketing agency to like whip up a campaign, right? And like some airport ads and some stuff like commercials. And you're like, well, when you don't have the thing, right? That's often the move, right? You get a bunch of executives, you talk about it, and it's just inspiring, but then it doesn't really do anything. And I always think, it's a sign of sort of like weakness when the commercials and all that stuff, like you just kind of know there's nothing behind it. And I think there's lots of companies you can point to where you see that's going on.
I want to see a commercial for AI stuff that's basically just like, hey kids, are you tired of doing homework? And then it just
I don't think they need to advertise that. I think that word of mouth on that is out.
Yeah, that one's got good word of mouth.
I think that is.
Yeah.
I think
there you go. The power. That would be a good case study then. The power of word of mouth among students. Well, speaking of word of mouth, now we also this past week, Nutanix. How do you say that? I should probably know, working at the company that I do.
I think that's how I say
it. They bought Mesosphere data center of the future.
Whoa. They did not buy Mesosphere. They bought the assets of Mesosphere.
Right.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Very big distinction.
Very big distinction for everyone.
Now, what does that mean Mesosphere is then?
Gone.
It means it's gone. It means they just like this, we're shutting this down. And someone said, okay,
they bought the
what would you like? What intellectual property from this would you like? And you don't have to hire anyone and you don't have
Does that mean they get like the chairs too?
Yeah. They could. I mean, it's really whatever they want to buy.
Unless they were in a WeWork.
It's usually like the trademark, the whatever intellectual property that goes with it, and maybe a little bit of source code, right?
Well, good. That was a good clarification. But
and then they usually hire. This is another point. They usually hire a few key people on contract, right?
Oh, I see. Because if you hire the assets, you no longer have the responsibility for the employees.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. They don't have any of that. They don't have any of the stock options. Like, they're like, okay, we'll just take this. And then they'll say, like, here are 3 people you should hire for 6 months to at least answer questions. And then
that's great. You no longer have the responsibility for humans, just computers.
I don't know. That's it's interesting to look at it. Yes.
Yeah. Well, so that aside, or that in front of us. So what you were a big fan of Mesosphere, everything, Brandon. Like, what was what? And I'm not asking this to say that, like, oh, look at that silly thing, but like what was your what was your vision for like why Mesosphere was interesting? Because I agree with you. Like, it was a fascinating, interesting like company and thing like that, but you were always very enthusiastic about it. So,
well,
give us a recap of that.
I do. I mean, I guess the thing, and to be fair about it, what I really was enthusiastic, I always thought their messaging or their product marketing of data center operating system, or DCOS, was always the right metaphor. Not unlike, I know obviously, Kote, you have the history with Pivotal, and just sort of like someone sort of coming out, like, no, this is the way we should really think of it. It's like, ultimately what we want is software that takes this crazy complex data center and just sort of wires it up like an operating system, where there's so many things in an operating system we just depend on day to day. The scheduler, the memory management, it just works, right? We can build software, we can do crazy stuff, and it all just works. And I always liked, because I think Mesosphere came out of like Twitter, right? I can't remember the whole lineage.
Yeah, that's the story.
And I remember like reading about that. This is back when Twitter infrastructure, I think,
was, I think they came out of academia.
Was it? Well, I think it was academia, and then Twitter started using it. And
then Twitter was like one of the flagship customers.
Right. And I just thought, like, it seemed like they were sort of, and then of course there was like the whole story of like, Twitter for a long time. Although this is funny to say this now, it's like there was a period of when Twitter had all these problems and was going down, but that was all before it was X, right? And then it seemed like they had at least these smart people, and they sort of had kind of like, taken this idea, data center operating system. And I thought it was like a really good message. And I thought like it was kind of the right message. And at the time it was like, oh, well, maybe this will win out in the, not just containers, but like they're sort of going to take the metaphor and simplify it all. That was sort of the part that I always thought was interesting. Of course, none of that happened. Kubernetes burst onto the scene, and I think in the end, Mesosphere probably just never had a chance once the community, the larger community, decided that Kubernetes was the way. I think, it was one of these things, like they were probably dead 3 years ago, right? And it's just taken this long. Because I think they just had a few big customers, and I don't know. I just think this is kind of like the opposite of the success story. Like, I don't necessarily think they did anything wrong. I just think they sort of got run over by the Kubernetes truck. But I still like the metaphor. And if you think about the wall of confusion slide, where we just like see like the 500 companies on the CNCF slide, it's like, I always thought DCOS was sort of like a better answer than having like just all of the stuff you have to figure out, but it has not gone that way at all.
Yeah. Maybe you can pick up the marketing collateral on the cheap, Brandon.
That's right. Maybe that's right. What can I just buy?
Can I get a trademark, please?
Yeah. But to your point, I mean, Kote, obviously you went through this with Pivotal a little bit, and we already referenced like Google and Microsoft. I think they all kind of had the same idea. It's like, hey, let's not just replicate the same problem and just sort of like vomit infrastructure everywhere. Let's take, let's try to make it simpler this time. But again, as we just kind of went over, like the market has, completely rejected that idea. And yes, people want infrastructure as a service, and that's not going to change anytime soon.
Yeah. I think, to tie together the TPM piece and what you were just saying, I only vaguely remember what you were just articulating, which is the data center of the future thing. And I think the Kubernetes world coasted on this idea for a little bit at first, but then it doesn't exist anymore. It was just like treating the data center as a computer was kind of like a little bit of the vision. In the same way that like I think about this more frequently than I should, but like, the word rice, you have pieces of rice, but there's not a singular or a plural for rice. There's just rice. And so like, if you look at like a bowl of rice that you've cooked, what is that? Is that a rice? Is it rice? I feel like you cook that whole bowl and it's a rice. So it gets very confusing. And I think that's why this kind of idea that the data center is just one computer doesn't really pan out. And then everyone just ends up wanting to, like, pay attention to the individual pieces of rice and worry about that and build it up on their own instead of just concerning themselves with a rice.
So, but two other fun facts out of this. One, and I like the rice metaphor. I am gonna have to go look up what is the plural of rice or the singular of rice, but I'll do that later on my own time. But my question, the thing I thought was interesting about this is that, just happenstance, Docker acquired this company, Atomic Jar, this week for $25 million. It looks like a fine solution, a testing startup.
Yeah.
But it just reminded me though that the new Docker is valued at over $2 billion, and of course they've completely divested themselves of all things container management. They're just a developer thing, and it's just interesting how it's played out, right? It's like, wow, like out of the ashes of the Docker container management has come a company that's like, that looks very successful. So
yeah,
I don't know what that means. I guess it's just sort of like, in the end, it's like, you can always, I don't know, there is a way. I guess it's like, I don't know. I was trying to think to myself, in enterprise software, maybe it's one of the most successful, like, I don't even want to call it a pivot or recapitalizations, but like, I can't think of anything that was basically left for dead and now grown back to 2 billion, which
it's
is a
like
testament to them.
Like Docker is like the Microsoft of unicorns, right? Like they figured out how to like kind of reinvent themselves and rebirth themselves. We got to we'll see how it finally ends up, but it seems
I mean, obviously there's a long way to go. Maybe it doesn't. And the other thing that I was just thinking is like, well, back to Matt's point, like, well, what if I did own the data center operating system? Like, what could you wrap it around? And it's like, well, maybe AI, right, is the way around this. Is like, the problem is we have all these computers. We're trying to make it all work together. Right now, even with all the stuff of Kubernetes, it's still really complicated. So maybe there is a artificial intelligence kind of way to like, okay, like, hey, figure out where all the YAML goes and something like that. So maybe, as we kind of talk about
I saw your booth at KubeCon, Brandon.
I know. I feel like this is like, I feel like that's all I got, right? I've just got like AI.
Figure out where all the YAML goes.
That's literally all I don't have anything else. I have no other ideas or code about what it is, but my idea is just sort of like, no, it does feel like the reason there isn't a data center of the future is that, at least right now, our operating system is like, it's just too complicated. Like no one can keep it all in their head. And it just gets like, it only takes a few computers and 2 or 3 applications before you're like, I've lost it. I don't know what it is. So like, I don't know, I kind of look to the future. I'm like, this does feel like the problem that, okay, just lots of different processes and applications. Could AI, be our way out of this? So I have no idea, probably not, but I just like that idea. I like it.
Yeah. Well, let's hope so. Well, speaking of getting our ways out of this, any bureaucracy this episode, Brandon?
Let's see. I sent some stickers to Michael in Pennsylvania, so I appreciate him writing in. If you'd like a sticker, all you have to do is send your postal address to stickers@softwaredefinedtalk.com, and I'll be happy to send you one anywhere in the world.
Well, there's a few conferences coming up that we want to mention. One, January 29th. That's the end of January, more or less. There's going to be that conference in Round Rock, which I have never been to, but Brandon has. Seems lovely. Also, March 14th to 17th, there's the Scale Conference, also DevOps Days LA. And I think they listed it, but I'll be speaking at DevOps Days LA, so I'll be there. That'll be nice. And then there's also DevOps Days Birmingham, Alabama, in April. I don't know if there's CFPs open, but you should go check and see if it is. And if you're interested in us mentioning your conference or even coming to your conference, you should contact us. And if you don't know how to contact us, go to softwaredefinedtalk.com and you can probably figure it out. But in the meantime, go to devopsdaysbirmingham.com. I hope that's a URL, devopsdays.org, and you can apply to speak there. I'm sure it will be lovely. Now, with that, Matt Ray, what do you have to recommend this episode?
So I've got an anti-recommendation and a recommendation. And my recommendation is you should check out Reese's Mini Peanut Butter Cups. They're for baking, but they're actually like the perfect size for just eating one at a time, and they don't have the wrapper. So, it's just like the essence of Reese's Peanut Butter Cups, bite size, perfect. But my anti-recommendation goes along with my keyboard odyssey that I've been on. So, there were some complaints that my keyboard might be too loud. So I was like, fine. I'll get the Keychron sells an acoustic kit. And it's got
like a real phrase.
What is that?
Keychron.
Keychron's the name of the keyboard company.
Okay.
All right.
And then they have an acoustic kit, which is like little special sound dampening foam that you can put inside the body of the keyboard to dampen the echoes or whatever.
Sure.
And the problem is you have to be really good at installation, and I'm not. So what I ended up with is keys that were spongy, where they'd stick, and I just it was a lesson in frustration where I got this, I installed it, I kept messing around with it, and eventually I just threw it out. So maybe it'll work for you, but my recommendation is leave it to the experts or just live with it.
How about yourself, Brandon?
Oh, I'm just amazed that people complained about the sound so much that they actually created a whole sound dampening project for the keyboard. That's
well, essentially they have something for everyone. If you're like, you know what, I wish my keys came in festive holiday colors. They have that, right? They have a Christmas kit for keys, and you're like, you know what, my keys are too sticky. They sell they sell lube for your switches. I mean, literally, they're gonna have everything.
I think the product manager there is probably like, we want everyone to use our keyboards, and so we will make them perfect for everyone.
Exactly. That is it. But it's a very DIY thing. That they sell kits of everything. You can assemble everything you want. And it's like, I'm not good enough at assembling an acoustic kit. Is essentially why it's my anti-pick.
Wow.
Very nice.
All right. Well,
it's hard.
Kudos to the keyboard community. I'm rocking my what am I working? Apple keyboard. That seems
Dark ages, man. Dark ages.
Man, I don't know. It just is what it is. It seems pretty quiet, but I don't know. So, but that's not my recommendation. My recommendation this week is pretty niche. This is so I read the book called The Fund, which is some narrative nonfiction reporting about Bridgewater, which is the hedge fund started by Ray Dalio, who we sometimes refer to Matt as the Ray Dalio of this podcast because it's he's a legendary investor. And I will just say this book was insane. I had read some things about the Bridgewater culture, but I don't know. I only can describe it as just one of the starkest Orwellian corporate environments ever been described in print. So the short summary is that Ray Dalio has written somewhere between 200 and 300 principles that he believes the company must kind of adhere to at all times. And so what they then implemented was an application in iPads where you rate every interaction with every other employee about them adhering to these principles. And if they don't adhere to the principles, then, they basically get negative scores. So it's like that Black Black Mirror episode where someone has a score across their thing all the time. And ultimately, so it just goes on and on about all the crazy things that went on in there. And I guess the idea behind it is that it promotes radical candor, right? So this idea that, you should just say what's on your mind and not hold anything back. But paradoxically, it seems like when you listen to all the interviews, is it caused the opposite effect. Like people were afraid to speak, didn't want to be said the wrong way. And of course, the person that was usually always right was, not surprisingly, Ray Dalio. So that part was crazy. And then finally, James Comey, who you may know as the former Attorney General of the United States, and had numerous run-ins with Trump. We won't cover those here, but he worked there, I guess, before, in between his government jobs. So they kind of have all these crazy examples of where he was tasked with running these trials and investigations of just kind of petty corporate politics, which is I don't know. It's just crazy that that he did this. And I guess my final thought about the whole book is I guess when you pay above market or significantly above market, people will pretty much tolerate anything. So with that, I don't know if you're interested in corporate cultures or you're interested in finance, you probably want to take a look at it. If not, maybe just read some of the articles about how crazy it is. So, and then And probably the best read is like, maybe things at your job are not perfect. Maybe it's not going exactly what you want. So this is a good book just to read, to be like, well, at least I don't work there. That place seems totally crazy. So check it out if you're interested in it.
Do you recommend listening to this book or reading it?
Well, as you know, Cote, I listen to pretty much all my books. So I listened to it. I thought it was, it's kind of like a book of stories. So I think it's very good as an audiobook, but I'm sure it would be good as a reading it as well.
That makes sense. If it's like some narrative scenes, it would be much better.
And I guess Ray Dalio, I've not read. He has published his own book about the principles, which I guess I want to highlight is, I guess that is a heavily edited version from the people who work there. So if you want to hear just straight from him about, sort of like why it's all great, you can go read that one, which I will not read and have not read.
Yeah, he was on an episode of like interviews with Tyler, and I don't know, I don't think this is about many episodes there, but that episode I was like, I don't think this interview was very comprehensive. He just came off as being just like a normal guy who makes a lot of money, and like I don't think so. Anyhow, my recommendation, I've got a couple of follow-up recommendations, but first of all, Kim and I started watching the 3rd season of Sex Education, the TV show on Netflix. You know how it is when you get to season 3 or 4 of a show, especially on Netflix, it could go bad. But so far, this one is pretty good. So I think it's not so bad.
I haven't gotten there yet, so I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, I mean, it's got Agent Scully in it. How could it go wrong, right? Like it's got that like hunk of a Swedish guy too. So whatever you got going on, it's good to see. I just have some follow-up recommendations. So I recommended how do you say her name? Nicola Griffith's book Meanwood, the sequel to Hild, and I did finish reading the 980 pages or something of it, and it gets a little Moby Dick in the middle where there's a lot of talk about wheat and barley and growing things, but other than that, it was pretty great, and I enjoyed that. And then, as always, I've been using Descript a lot recently for video editing, and I wouldn't say podcast editing, but converting videos into podcasts. And Descript is great. It's a really good video editing app if you're into that. Well, speaking of really good video editing apps, maybe you've watched the video of this episode on YouTube at the Software Defined Talk channel, or maybe you've listened to it in a podcast. And if you want to get links to things we talked about, all sorts of things we didn't talk about, how you can apply to the CFP for DevOps Days Birmingham, or I don't know, figure out what Reese's Mini Unwrapped are, you can go to softwaredefinedtalk.com/445 and get all of those things. And with that, we'll see everyone next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
I know you got to drop, man, but what were you saying? So this, I guess I got to learn how to delete this stuff, huh?
Well,
or is it in?
No, my other meeting hasn't. They haven't shown up, so
it's only in YouTube, so it just has to be deleted from there. I think
it's YouTube, and the guy didn't show up in the list of users. You have to go to the messages. I don't know. There must be a hole in their API or something. So I deleted the messages, but yeah, that was weird.
I
deleted it, muted him, kicked him out of our channel, but it's still
there.
Stuck around. Yeah.
All right. Well, apologies to everyone. I don't know. I gotta learn. I have to pull up the YouTube thing when we're recording. I always forget. Get too many windows. I need to know.
Well, it doesn't show up in the live chat. It's not live chat. It's some other alt chat or something like that.
Oh, weird.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, I gotta drop.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
All right. Well, thanks for everyone tuning in. Michael, good to see you. Hopefully we got your CFP mentioned. I'll put that in the show notes as well. So hopefully some people will go out to Birmingham and participate with you. And so our schedule coming forward. So we're probably going to record a couple more episodes, bank them as they call it, before the holidays. So we'll be on probably the Friday morning of the 15th, and then on Monday afternoon around this time. So if all goes well, we'll stream a couple more times before the holidays, and hopefully you guys will enjoy it. And with that, we will talk to you next time.
Bye.